We're riding on the internet, cyberspace set free. Hello, virtual reality.
Interactive appetite, searching for a website, a window to the world, got to get online.
Take a spin, now you're in with the techno set. You're going surfing on the internet.
I find myself pretty lucky that I lived in an era where the internet wasn't super prominent. I was born in 1999. We had internet, but it was super slow, and really it was just a cool toy to play with, where I could play Cartoon Network games or Papa Tropica. If you know, you know. Otherwise, people in my age group, I've just turned 26, still remember a time where the internet wasn't dominant. Family barbecues were frequent, when people knew how to talk to each other and had attention spans that lasted more than 17.5 seconds. So when the internet finally did become a main part of my life, I think I was adept to handle it in a way that still lets me question anything and everything I saw and heard. This is a skill incredibly useful for the age of AI, by the way. I can spot BS on the internet in a way that my grandparents simply can't. But my brain isn't completely fried by an exploitative algorithm, only partially fried. Like medium rare. Not quite well done like I fear for my little sisters.
I'm about to tear this thing up.
But the internet would play a huge part in my philosophical and ideological journey. My sophomore year of high school, I had a world studies class where we often talk about politics and follow the events of the next presidential election. This would be the 2016 election. That class would be the true start of my ideological journey. It's why this is my second video in the series, but it's episode 1. In following the election around the end of 2014, I came across Kulinski of the YouTube channel Secular Talk. I still watch him today and respect his channel even though we have slightly verged in our beliefs. I never would have imagined that I am now further left than even he is. But at the time, and still true today, Cal struck me as incredibly honest, competent, and knowledgeable. He was on it. After years of growing up with Obama, he was a refreshing source of authenticity that I didn't know I needed at the time.
I see booty shaking. It's so hot. I mean, bad. Very bad. They must stop this. Let's watch it again, this time in slow motion.
It wasn't long until he introduced me to this little candidate from Vermont running for US president.
Now you see, this little bird doesn't know it. Oh my.
Bernie hit at the right time. My hatred for corruption was growing more and more every day, and finally, before I ever hit any amount of despair, a voice of reason came along and opened my mind to the radical idea that things could actually be, like, better and stuff. I know, mind-blowing. Here you had a guy not talking about his personal life or giving you a word salad about freedom and justice in the American way, and that's why I had to bail out Wall Street. No. Here you had a guy who stayed on message about policy. To many, the idea that a politician would focus on policy and not just rhetoric is crazy. But for me, it was obviously the way a candidate should conduct himself. I don't care who's sucking whose dick under the Oval Office. I don't care that the president is where I'm from and mixed just like me. All that was a distraction from what mattered. I was about to enter college in a few short years, and had watched my sister barely graduate. Not because she didn't have good grades or she was stupid. She went to the best high school in Chicago at the time academically, and she went to a great college. No, she nearly dropped out because she couldn't afford it. And along comes Bernie who says, "Hey, don't you think this country could commit itself to doing what many other major and even smaller countries around the world do and invest in the next generation of kids by giving them a free college education? Is that so crazy?" Well, yes, Bernie, apparently it was. I had to watch the Democratic Party repeatedly attack Bernie, harder than they did for Trump even.
No bank is too big to fail. No executive too powerful to jail.
Attacks on Wall Street speculation.
The disastrous and illegal behavior on Wall Street. The wealthiest people, the top 1.5%. CEOs of Wall Street.
I am not a single issue candidate, and I do not believe we live in a single issue country.
Enough is enough. I have had it with this.
Trump, who in name radically disagrees with Democrats, which is when I realized, oh, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have the same masters and motives. They were never going to let a guy like Bernie win, someone who's even slightly a threat to the status quo. With Bernie, though, for the first time, I realized America could be bold and actually move in the direction of change and foster the kind of hope that Obama had promised and failed to deliver. A Bernie presidency would mean I wouldn't have to deal with the financial stress and burdens that my older sisters dealt with. It would mean that my parents wouldn't get wiped out financially if, God forbid, they needed to go to the hospital. It would mean the legacy of America that I had bought into would actually be true and that my generation would be better off than the last. Something my father taught me was inevitable. And then he lost. Hillary and the Democrats pulled every trick in the book to make sure he wasn't elected. Same with Biden in 2020. Turns out, the Democrats do know how to fight. But only when it's from the left. Heaven forbid they formidably challenge the Republicans. With Republicans, you should compromise and treat them like delicate little flowers. With the left, fuck you and fall in line.
I think a lot of what he churned up in the primary campaign was very hurtful in the general election against me. And I see him doing the same thing. You know, with his supporters, he doesn't disown the things they say about, some of my favorite Democrats, people like Kamala Harris.
Bernie's loss in 2016 and 2020 had cemented the idea, to me, that Americans weren't strong-willed enough or informed enough to vote in their own self-interest. I began to understand that the media, for the Democrats and the Republicans, both old and new media, had created the stranglehold on information and attention that we are seeing the consequences of today. Putting in the right candidate was not the problem. The system itself was the problem. And while I was hopeless after 2020 that America would ever change its course, ironically, the 2024 election would change my idea in that the Democratic Party is the least popular it's ever been. But I'll touch on that in a later video. With Cal Kulinski and Bernie Sanders, I discovered, wow, there are other Americans out there who get it. And it has nothing to do with identity politics. Other channels at the time featured progressives like Cenk Uygur and JR of TYT, and a broad coalition of other types of people. I've got criticisms of TYT today, for sure, but back then they were certainly one of the channels that helped open my eyes. For once, the role didn't feel like it was lacking common sense. Other heroes like AOC and Zohran Mamdani were out there. They just weren't in the spotlight for one reason or the other. Now I look back at my reformist era as ignorant. Literally ignorant in that I had no idea about socialism or communism. I barely knew about capitalism back then. But I don't fault myself or anyone who was in that position. We simply weren't taught history, economics, philosophy, or government properly. Now I realize that my reformist era was a stepping stone to my socialist beliefs today. The next video I'm going to talk about the 2024 election, which is the beginning of my reading journey, and my introduction into Richard Wolff, who truly opened my eyes and pivoted me to the ideology that I hold today. Socialism. Listen, it took years and a soulless job for me to really go Super Saiyan and ask the question, is this it? Can we really not do better than capitalism? More on that in the next video in this series. A better tomorrow is possible. Thank you for watching.